Chairman, thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. I think whether any of us on this committee disagree or agree with you, your responsiveness to our questions, your willingness to be here, and frankly, your patience are really admirable, and I thank you for your public service. I want to ask about a topic that we have discussed briefly, which is the investigation we're conducting in the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigation concerning the Coast Guard. We have an inquiry into the Coast Guard's handling of their internal inquiry known as Operation Fouled Anchor, and I'm just going to be really blunt with you. We've been extremely disappointed, in fact, angry with the Coast Guard's slow pace of response to that inquiry. We sent our initial request letter to the Coast Guard in September for documents. Only about 3% of those documents have been received, and they are only responsive email records. I understand that the total document production volume includes 11,700 pages, largely consisting of investigative records. There are fewer than 300 pages of emails. I know they have other work to do, but this delay is unacceptable, and I say with sadness that it seems to reflect a resistance to coming clean about Operation Fouled Anchor. And we've had discussions with the Coast Guard. We've pressed them on this issue repeatedly. And I would like your commitment to this inquiry to make sure that the Coast Guard is responsive. And I'd like to ask you what you can and will do to ensure that the Coast Guard fully cooperates with our subcommittee's inquiry, including accelerating the pace of its response and providing all documents without redactions.
Senator, let me allow me to provide you my commitment to work with you and the subcommittee in fully supporting the Commandant's similar commitment to work with you and the subcommittee. It is intolerable for anyone in the United States Coast Guard or in any agency or office of our department to feel unsafe. We must hold perpetrators accountable. We owe it to you and to this committee to be transparent in the work we do to achieve the life of that value. The Commandant, with whom I have met a number of times in relation to this investigation, is fully committed to achieving that value, to ensuring the Coast Guard is better tomorrow than it was yesterday, to cooperating fully with you and your committee, and you have my full commitment.
Thank you. One of the apparent or stated reasons for the slow pace of responsiveness is the lack of the technology necessary to screen the documents. In effect, I'm going to exaggerate a little bit, but they're using 1950s technology. Maybe it's 1980s technology. But that's no excuse. If you were to send the Coast Guard on a mission, you would not take as an excuse, well, our boats can't get there because they haven't been modernized. The Coast Guard ought to be responsive to our inquiry, and it will send the most regrettable message if we have to, in effect, subpoena these records from the Coast Guard. So it's more than just good intentions. And I know that you have those intentions, and I trust and hope the Commandant does as well, to make sure that the survivors and victims are vindicated in this inquiry, that the Operation Fouled Anchor work product and other transcripts of interviews and whatever documents are relevant are provided without unnecessary redactions. And I hope that you will fulfill that commitment.
I most certainly will, Senator, and I know that I have approved the waiver of, I believe it is the deliberative privilege, so that certain redactions could be eliminated, and the subcommittee that you help lead receives the information that it needs.
Thank you. We are going to press that inquiry with full vigor and priority, and I appreciate your cooperation and partnership in pursuing it. I want to ask about a topic unlikely to be raised by my colleagues, which is Plum Island. And you are to be forgiven if it doesn't immediately strike a chord with you. It's one of the last gems of undeveloped land in the middle of Long Island Sound, more than 100 acres. It currently houses the United States Department of Homeland Security's Plum Island Animal Disease Center, but it's also home to pristine beaches, wildlife, shoreline, habitats for hundreds of plants and animals. It is truly a treasure, not just for New York and Connecticut, which share Long Island Sound, but for the nation as a whole. Unfortunately, the operation of the new facility, which is supposed to replace it, a facility that's going to be in Kansas, relocating that animal disease center, has been delayed, and it's caused a setback in the transfer of Plum Island. So the funding has been left in some uncertainty. The multi-year Plum Island closure and support program was estimated to cost $150 million, but that funding is now uncertain. The FY25 DHS budget request notes that as a result of the delay, DHS will need additional funding to cover the cost of the Plum Island Disease Center program. I'm very concerned about the delay. I hope that you can commit to working with me and my colleagues from Connecticut and New York to finding a long-term conservation outcome for Plum Island that will avoid commercial development and a degradation of this pristine and treasured natural resource.
I do, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Cinnamon, recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary Mayorkas, for being here today. Before I begin, I want to take a moment to correct the